come to order. This will be a formal hearing, and I will turn it over to the administrative judge.
Good morning, everyone. Today is May 20th, 2022. We are in Nashville, Tennessee regarding two hearings. For the sake of judicial economy, the parties have agreed to try these matters concurrently. The first is the matter of the Tennessee Department of Commerce and Insurance versus William Franklin Breeding. The docket number is 12.40-220-650A. The second is the matter of Commerce and Insurance versus Brian Smith. The docket number is 12-40-220-651A. I am Administrative Judge Claudia Padfield, assigned by the Tennessee Secretary of State to sit with the Peace Officer Standards and Training Commission on behalf of the Commissioner for the Tennessee Department of Commerce and Insurance. Representing the department this morning is Attorney Kimberly Cooper. Representing Mr. Breeding is Mr. Marcos Garza. Mr. Garza, can you just raise your hand?
Daniel Morrell here from Garza Law.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Mr. Morrell. And then representing Mr. Smith are attorneys Richard Gaines and James Owen. Thank you. So the court reporter has asked that we speak into the microphone if you're not going to speak loud enough so that she can hear you. She's sitting back to my right. So just to remind everyone that this is being recorded, but the court reporter. Chair, do we have a quorum for the commission this morning?
We do.
Thank you.
We need to take the vote on that. I mean, a roll call.
We can take a roll call
That'd be fine.
if Commissioner or Director he has it, if he'll go with it.
Take a roll call. Commissioner Birchfield. Commissioner Carter. Here. Commissioner Cherry. Here. Commissioner Forrester. Here. Commissioner Green. Here. Commissioner Halsey. Commissioner Isbell. Present. Commissioner Jackson. Here. Commissioner Russell. Here. Commissioner Spangler. Here. Commissioner Wagner. Here. Commissioner Wright. Here. Vice Chair Faulkner. Here. And Chairman Parton. Here. Chairman, you have a quorum.
Thank you.
Thank you. I will be making all rulings regarding the order of proceedings, admissibility of evidence, and questions of law under the authority granted to me by the Tennessee Uniform Administrative Procedures Act. However, I will not participate in determining the findings of facts, the conclusions of law, or the ultimate decision of this commission. Those decisions will be made by the commission members only. Commission members, you have been provided some iPads with some potential exhibits uploaded on them. I will ask you not to look at any of those documents until they have been admitted by evidence by me into evidence for these hearings, and then you can look at those documents. I have them uploaded onto what's called the 10 cloud. Both parties have uploaded those. I've not looked at those and will not look at them until they are admitted into evidence by myself. You are also not to use any of your own personal devices, such as a cell phone or anything else, to do any other investigations or look into any information regarding these two cases. Do any commission members have any prior knowledge that they need to disclose on the record for either Mr. Breeding or Mr. Smith?
I did.
Okay.
I have worked with both of them, so I will be abstaining for any decisions.
So you're going to recuse yourself
Yes.
from both cases. Excellent. Thank you, Commissioner member. Anyone else? And we still have a quorum even without Commissioner abstaining, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, perfect. Okay. Someone else? Yes.
I'll have to be leaving at 11:30, so.
Okay. So you won't be, you're not recusing yourself, you're just not going to be participating in the entirety of the hearings.
That's great.
Okay, that's fine.
And Judge, my name is Counsel Underwood. I just want to make sure the commission members introduce themselves when speaking on the record, if possible, for the court, or make it easier for her. She will see your name tags, but some of them are not there, and service or possible.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Particularly on this side, she can't see your name tags at all. So just identify yourself on the record before you start to speak. Members of the commission, during the time of the hearing, no discussion of this case should take place between the commission members, witnesses, attorneys, or any other persons unless all parties are present. This commission sits like a jury and must only decide evidence introduced at the hearing and reaching this decision. The Tennessee Sunshine Law requires that all commission discussions and deliberations to be in public before all parties. Failure to observe the sunshine law may result in the commission's action being reversed or remanded if it is appealed. Ms. Cooper, any other preliminary matters we need to discuss?
Yes, ma'am, I just have a few.
Okay,
In prior discussions with respondents council, we have a few stipulations that we've agreed to. The first is that the agreed order that is labeled 12.40-210-466A, Reading Smith agreed order would come in as the first exhibit. Secondly, that Sheriff Reading's post and basic certificates would come in as collective exhibit 2. Chief Deputy Brian Smith's basic and post certificates would come in as collective exhibit 3. They would show respectively that Sheriff Reading was certified, post-certified on April 10th, 1995, and became sheriff on September 1st, 2014. Chief Deputy Smith became post-certified on October 24th, 1996, and became chief deputy, I think, also on September 1st, 2014. And that the exhibit labeled Union County Pay Info that was supplied by the finance director of Union County, that they stipulate to the authenticity of those documents, and they would come as the next exhibit.
right. So I have the petitioner's exhibits pulled up.
Yes, ma'am.
And so I just want to make sure before we look at those. Feel like so the agreed order will be exhibit number 1,
Yes, ma'am.
and then which
Sheriff Reading.
was it? Reading was exhibit 2.
Reading, post, and basic certs.
Okay. And then Mr. Smith was exhibit 3.
Yes, ma'am. And then there on the bottom is Union County Pay Info.
From you. So that's what I'm. We'll accept all those documents as stipulated. I'm renaming them now. Commission members, now that I've accepted those documents and the evidence, you're welcome to look at those. Any other preliminary matters, Ms. Cooper?
Yes, ma'am. The respondents exhibit labeled affidavit of Ricky Allen Carter that was also due to prior to this hearing to come in as an exhibit.
Please.
I believe it's on the main page, not actually in the folder.
Yes. The affidavit of Ricky Allen Carter will be exhibit number 5.
I did have one other issue I needed to address with Your Honor.
Okay.
Officer John Brogan of the Plainview Police Department, he was listed as a witness on the witness list that I submitted and filed on April 28th. His contact info is also on there. I would ask that he be available to testify remotely today. I see that he's already on the Zoom link and available. I would just ask that he be allowed to do that today.
Counselors, for the respondents, any objections?
A little bit of a surprise for us, Judge. We have no objection.
This is a good time to go through the technical record on both of the cases so that both sides know exactly what exhibits have already been filed. On the Breeding case, I have a notice of hearing and charges filed by the department on March 9th, 2022. Judge Kim Summers issued a scheduling order on March 16th, 2022. A witness and exhibit list was filed on April 28th, 2022, and then by one party, and then the other party filed a witness and exhibit list on May 9th, 2022. On that case, are either side aware of any other documents that should have been filed and received in this case?
No, Your Honor, not that we know of.
No, ma'am.
And then on the Smith case, just because the time frames are just slightly different, a notice of hearing and charges were filed by the department on March 9th, 2022. An amended notice of charges filed by the department on March 10th, 2022. Judge Summers issued a scheduling order on April 20th, 2022. Each side filed a potential witness and exhibit list. One was filed on April 28th, 2022. The second was, again, was filed on May 9th, 2022. And then a served subpoena was filed just a couple days ago on May 18th, 2022. Ms. Cooper, counselors, any other office documents you should receive? Okay, perfect. And those documents consist of the technical record. Counselors, for the respondents, any other preliminary matters from your perspectives that we need to address?
No, Your Honor, we would make a brief statement, very brief, if you allow it.
Well, I'll allow opening statements, yes.
Very
All right. Ms. Cooper, then opening statement from the department.
Yes, ma'am. Ladies and gentlemen of the commission, we are here today, unfortunately, involving the two top law enforcement officials of Union County, Sheriff Reading and Chief Deputy Smith. The background of this case is also unfortunate that in late 2020, the commission became aware that there was some activity that indicated there may be some cheating on the required mandated in-service that all officers in the state of Tennessee must take in order to get their salary supplements. Salary supplements were issued to Union County Sheriff's Office based on that information that was supplied by Sheriff Reading and the then GDI, Chief Deputy Smith. As a result of an investigation and the respondents appearing before this commission in June of 2021, an agreement was entered, the agreed order that you have in front of you. That as a result of that agreed order, these two respondents pledged to you, the commissioners, that the certification of the chief deputy would be suspended for 6 months. That the certification of the sheriff would be placed on probation for a period of 2 years. That there would be spot checks by the commission to make sure that they were doing what they were supposed to be doing. And the most important thing that they were supposed to be doing as a result of their failure to live up to their responsibilities in the training of the Union County Sheriff's Department was to work with an outside agency, another county, to develop training for Union County officers. We are here today because that did not happen at all. They have completely failed to live up to their responsibilities to you. And as a result of that, I'm asking for their certifications.
Thank you, Ms. Cooper. Mr. Morrell, Mr. Gaines, Mr. Lowen, you.
If I could, very briefly, run.
Of course.
I haven't. I'll be very brief. A lot of that is very true. We did enter an agreed order, Union County Sheriff's Department, Sheriff Reading, and Chief Deputy Smith regarding the training program there and things that were done in error and things that needed to be corrected. One of the punishments she didn't mention that is an issue today here because in the charges, and I represent Chief Brian Smith, and I'm going first for a reason that makes sense in a second you'll see, is that Brian Smith, during the time period he was supposed to be suspended from post, was in fact acting in somewhat like a law enforcement officer during that time period. And that's actually one of the charges Post has brought here today, and that's why Brian Smith is here. We've done a complete investigation, and he in fact in no way acted as a law enforcement officer. Let's go back for a second, if I can, very briefly. His penalty for what happened before the agreed order was that he'd be relieved as a training officer at Union County, which that was some pay he was also relieved from. And then from June 1st to December 1st, he would be suspended from post. Now, that agreed order did not say he would be suspended from his job. His job then, and there's a letter that you'll see in his file on June 1st from the Sheriff of Union County that states that he'd be relieved from his arrest duty. his gun would be surrendered, his badge would be surrendered, his ID would be surrendered, and he would no longer wear the uniform of the Union County Sheriff's Department. He could not wear a badge or a shirt with a badge on it or anything like that. He'd have to wear civilian clothes. He was an administrative officer. He would work in the fleet and aid with budget and things like that. Now, that's in fact what he did. That letter's in the file. He was suspended. Other people can attest to that. We have other witnesses will attest to that. And I think that what we also have, that what Post has said is that he has acted during that time period as a law enforcement officer and has given us discovery that we've had to kind of try to figure out, but we think there are about 5 or 6 separate incidents that they say he acted in a law enforcement capacity during that 6 months. At the end of the 6 months, of course, December 1st, he was given his weapon back, he was given his badge back, his ID back, and he went back to wearing his uniform. Now, we've got a lot of other officers, we've got dispatch here. He was never dispatched to a scene. I'm not going to go into the length of proof, but there are 5 incidents. I'm going to call them the funeral, the robbery, the wreck, the door kick-in, and the cars in his driveway. And those incidents, in a minute, we're going to flesh out with witnesses. Hopefully, at the end, I'll be able to tell you why each of those incidents, where there are some facts that seem to indicate that Brian Smith was doing something law enforcement related. In fact, he was doing nothing law enforcement related. So during that time period, he respected the post-certification suspension. He was suspended. He was not a police officer. I'm not going to, it's silly. I'd actually brought the definition of law enforcement officer to this group, and it's like bringing a definition of attorneys to my bar meetings, right? I mean, what the heck? You all know what a post-certified officer is. It's not someone that deals with the fleet, deals with administrative chores like budgeting. That's what Brian Smith did for 6 months. Now he's back on duty now. So, in other words, the agreed order that we just discussed did not suspend him from his job. It suspended him from post-certification, his arrest powers, his police powers, but not his job. And we'll be able to show that in a minute.
Thank you, Mr. Gaines.
Thanks.
Mr. Morrow, would you like to make an opening statement?
Yes, Commissioner. Honor. Ladies and gentlemen of the commission, we're here on a little bit of a narrow issue here today. There was an agreed order that went down in June of 2021 that had 8 different requirements and pledges to be completed by Sheriff Breeding. We're dealing about 2 of those today. Now, my colleague has said one of those allegations is that Chief Deputy Smith, during his time of post-suspension, did in fact act as a law enforcement officer. I believe the proof will show, and witnesses will show that is not the case. The allegation against Sheriff Breeding was that Chief Deputy Smith did that under his control and supervision. So why should it kind of matter? If Chief Deputy Smith was not acting as a law enforcement officer, Sheriff Breeding was not in violation of the order under his control and supervision. So the issue, I think, really before us is the issue of training. Now, per that order, the Union County Sheriff's Department, through Sheriff Breeding, expand and modernize their training program, working with another county, and trying to avoid any kind of abuses of the new system that came in. The proof will show, well, first of all, Chief Deputy Smith was relieved of his duties as training officer. That was part of the order. That did happen. The proof will show that Officer Chris Carden was put into his place. After many discussions with Sheriff Breeding, Chris Carter reached out to Granger County in multiple conversations and worked with them about how their training program, how Union County's training program worked, the best way to go forward into bringing their training program up to where it needs to be. Chris Carden had another employment opportunity, so Officer Philip King came in and took over for him. Officer Philip King, of course, had worked with Officer Carden, who had found we have this online via that showed capability of abuse. So we're going to get rid of it immediately. The idea was to go to, we want to be doing all in-person training. We want to have the most robust training program we possibly can. The issue is we're also in the midst of COVID. It's a department with a fairly limited budget because of size, fairly limited number of officers available. So the training still has to continue. Officers still have to be post-certified. This is a large ship. You can't just take a right-hand turn. It does take a little bit of time. And they knew that they had to have some online training in the interim while they worked on the new program. Chris Carden went and worked with Clinton City Police. where he found that they were using a different program. At least one didn't have those capabilities. And so they implemented that immediately, even though they still are under contract for the old program. Cost to the department. And when Philip King came in, he took it as his goal to move that training program forward. He sent out officers to get certified to instruct courses. He put in close curriculums and got them approved. 5 with 2 more on the way. They're no longer rushing at the end of the year to get all their officers certified. They're ahead of the curve. Lead officer King will tell me they're 90% better today than they were last year. They took the mandatory training and said, you know what, there's also recommendations. We're making those mandatory. They expanded that program. They've had, at least on another occasion, another officer from another jurisdiction come in to take one of the classes that they had post-certified. Sheriff Reading's goal is to have the best possible training program you can. And in the course of a year, during COVID, during this, they've made not only significant improvement, made impressive improvement, and they're continuing on. And we still have a year left on Sheriff Reading's probation. And they expect to even be better next year. So the allegation that they have not done what Post has asked them to do is just not true.
Thank you, Mr. Morrell. First witness, Ms. Cooper.
Would be Ralph Bella.
Please raise your right hand, sir. Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you?
I do.
Thank you.
State your name, please.
Raphael Bello.
And you work for the Post Commission, is that correct?
That's correct.
And also the Tennessee Law Enforcement Training Academy.
That's correct.
And what are your duties with both of these organizations?
I instruct some classes at the Tennessee Law Enforcement Training Academy, and I function as a investigator for the Post Commission, processing paperwork and investigating complaints.
And in October of 2021, you had reason to go to Union County.
I did.
And who did you go with?
I went with, at the time, Assistant Director Dexter Mines and Investigator Catherine Cooper.
And why were you going to Union County, sir?
We have received a complaint that Chief Deputy Brian Smith of Union County was functioning as a law enforcement officer in the county, and that they had not done any in-person training as agreed to by the order.
When you got to Union County, where did you go first?
We went to Blaine Police Department.
And why did you go there first?
We met with complainants.
Met with the,
We met with the complainants at the Blaine Police Department.
after meeting with the complainants, where did you go then?
We went by Brian Smith's residence.
And how did you know where he lived?
We have his address indicated.
Is it required that the officers keep you updated with both their employment and their home addresses?
That is correct.
Okay. And when you went out to Chief Deputy Smith's home, what, if anything, of interest did you see?
We saw what appeared to be an unmarked patrol car in the driveway.
Okay. Were any pictures taken of the unmarked patrol car in the driveway?
Yes.
If I may bring up the Union County, the exhibit labeled Union County 6, all details at 4, and go forward to page 6 and 7. This is spinning. Okay. Having some technical difficulties, Judge.
Right, Ms. Cooper.
Investigator Cooper is trying to do that.
I do. I do.
Ms. Cooper, let's make sure that we accept the documents into evidence before the commission members look at them.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Scroll to page 6 and 7. Oh, well, I minimized that before I put them up there.
Right.
It took me a second to, she asked me. Investigator Bello, I just showed you 2 pages of pictures. It was actually 3 different pictures. Did you recognize those pictures?
I do.
And what are they?
They appear to be of a black Dodge unmarked patrol car
And where were those pictures taken?
at the residence of Bryanston,
And what day were they taken?
the day that we were there conducting the investigation.
And at this time, I would ask that page 6 and 7 of that exhibit come in as the next collective exhibit.
Any objections, councilors?
No objection, Your Honor.
I'll accept it. So it's somewhat tricky because there's 7 pages, and so I don't have the authority, I don't have the capability, not the authority, I don't have the capability to separate them out. And so I'll have to accept. I'd like to address all of it at once, maybe even if you have to go a little bit out of order.
Yes, ma'am.
If there's some objections, then you'd have to send it to me later. But I'm assuming that what you uploaded, the 7 pages, is also what you provided to the commission members. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
As one document. And so for them to look at that document and open it, let's address everything that's in that document first
Okay.
before I accept. I appreciate there's no objections to the 2 pages, but let's talk about the rest of the other 5 pages.
I'll take them all out of order.
Okay, we can always come back, Ms. Cooper. Mhm.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Mr. Bella, I'm going to take you through each page. If you could tell me if you recognize page 1 of this labeled exhibit, call details and R.
I do.
Okay. And what is that, sir?
Appears to be a screenshot of a mobile data terminal.
And what is the date on it?
It's June 12th, 2021.
And is the say you recognize the 2nd page?
I do.
What is that?
That is also a screenshot of the meeting.
And what date is on that?
That's dated June 24th, 2021.
Tell me what date is on that, or if you recognize it first.
I do recognize that as a screenshot of MDT,
And what's the date on that?
and that's dated 9/14/2021.
Recognize this.
I recognize that as well.
What is that?
That also appears to be a report of some sort that also appears to be on MDT.
Okay. And what's the date on that?
It appears to be November 4th of 2021.
Sure.
So
This is on page 5, yes. if I could. The foundation witness for these might be better, another witness.
Okay.
They have objections to it. I don't want to get into like the argument about it, but so if you would prefer that I separate out those last 2 pages and submit those as an exhibit as opposed to a bulk exhibit of all 7 pages.
Right. So what I'll do is I'll accept the 2 pictures as collected exhibit 6. And I will advise the commission members, you are only to look at the last 2 pages of that potential exhibit, pages 6 and 7. They're easy in that they're the only photographs.
Yes.
Everything else are screenshots.
Yes.
So you're welcome to pull up that document, and look at, and I believe Ms. Cooper might pull it up behind me.
Let me use it.
Okay, exactly. But should you look at that on your on your iPads, please only look at the last 2 pictures that I will accept it as collective exhibits 6. You will have to send that to me separately, Ms. Cooper.
Thank you. Investigator Bello, the 2 pictures or the 3 pictures that have just been referenced, that does depict the location of Chief Deputy Smith's home, correct?
Correct?
You do recognize it as it appeared that day, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And were those pictures taken while you were there?
Yes.
Okay. And I would ask at this time they be entered as the next exhibit.
I've accepted them as collective exhibits. There was already no objection.
No objection.
So we've already
Okay, very
addressed it. So Ms. Cooper's doing it twice to make sure her bases are covered.
Right.
Already done.
All right. Investigator Bello, after you were at Chief Deputy Smith's home and saw the car, what did you do?
We went to the sheriff's office.
And why did you do that?
We went to follow up and speak with the training officer, the sheriff, and the chief deputy.
Okay. And so when you arrived at the sheriff's department, what happened?
We were let inside and set in a room to wait for the sheriff and the chief deputy to arrive.
Okay. And again, who else was with you at this point?
Former assistant director Dexter Mines and investigator Kathy.
Was Sheriff Reed present at the department when you arrived?
No, he was not.
Okay. Do you remember who let you in?
I believe it was an investigator. I do not recall his name.
Okay. Do you remember what time of day this was?
It was approximately about 4 in the afternoon.
So late in the afternoon.
Yes, ma'am.
Who arrived first, Sheriff Reading or Chief Deputy Smith?
Don't recall. I believe Sheriff Reed did first.
Okay.
But they were pretty close together. We didn't wait for either of them very long.
Okay. And did you speak to Sheriff Reading when he arrived?
I did.
All right. And tell the commission about that conversation.
We spoke in reference to the training. We looked in Acatus and saw that they had moved essentially from the B Academy platform to the Police One platform, continued to do online training. We spoke in reference to doing in-person training, and that's when he informed me that they had reached out to a neighboring county, that their former GDI had left, and that they were in the process still of reaching out to try and work something out to improve the training.
Did you, and you said that was Sheriff Reading?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Did you speak to Chief Deputy Smith?
Not very much.
Okay. Did he eventually arrive though?
Yes,
All right. And was he, how was he dressed?
just plain clothes.
Okay. What was he driving?
He was driving a white Dodge van.
Okay. Is the white Dodge van in the pictures that have previously been entered?
Yes,
When Chief Deputy Smith arrived, did you speak with him? I may have already asked you. Sorry.
you did. I didn't speak to Chief Smith very much. We had asked for some timesheet records to document just employment time, and he went with Investigator Cooper at that time to get those records.
Okay. And you testified a moment ago that you had looked into Acatus, the software. Well, if you could, for the commissioners, how is the training logged into Acatus?
Acatus is a software system that we use to track all our data, training, personnel records. A GDI or training officer is given access to that software system and login information. They then submit that training to us, and we review it and make sure it's categorized correctly. One is it's reviewed, it is processed and approved, and it becomes part of that officer and agency's file in the software.
And you said that you looked into Union County training. Was that at your own initiative or was that at the request of someone?
The request of Assistant Director Mines, we were reviewing what kind of training they had been doing since they had entered into the agreement.
At any point between when the agreed order was entered into in June and when you went out there at the end of October or beginning of November, do you recall anyone from Union County reaching out to you regarding the training?
No,
Do you recall anyone reaching out from Union County requesting assistance on setting up training or what else they could do to meet the requirements of the agreed order?
no,
Since this investigation started, have you done a review of the 2021 training of Union County?
yes.
And what have you found regarding in-person versus, or what has been logged, I should say, regarding in-person versus online training?
That most of the training has continued to be online. Very few in-person training is occurring in 2021.
Okay. Have you also done a review of 2022 training up to this point that has been logged into the case?
I have.
Okay, and what did you tell the commissioners what you continue to find?
I also found that in 2022, most of the training continues to be online and very little is in person.
Okay, are there any exceptions to that online training regarding any members of the Union County Sheriff's Department?
Yes, it appears that most of the administration has done their training in person through whether it be the sheriff's association meetings, things like that. But most of the subordinates have done most of their training online.
All right, and when you say the administration, are you referring to specifically Sheriff Reading,
Yes,
Chief Deputy Smith?
yes,
And is there a third individual that has also done in-person training?
yes.
And you recall who that was?
Yes, there was a Deputy Lawson and Deputy King who also done in-person training.
Okay, and as investigator with Post, can you tell the commission who is Mr. King?
King is their current GDI.
Okay, is he here today?
Yes, ma'am.
Has GDI King reached out to you either before the hearing today or again, anytime since the agreed order was entered or since he became GDI to speak with you about the training?
Yes, he has reached out to me since he has taken over concerning submitting lesson plans and making sure that what he's submitting is correct. And some of the things that he's putting in place to ensure that they are processed correctly in the system.
I believe that's all the questions I have for Administrator Douglas. Thank you.
If I could, Inspector Fellow, Richard Haynes, I'm Brian Smith, Chief Deputy Smith's attorney. Just a few quick questions. Sure. You say that you went to Union County in this particular visit in October last year based on some complaints you got from some people over at the Blaine Police Department, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And the Blaine Police Department, is there some reason why we can't name those names? Was one of them Tim Wyrick?
That is correct.
Okay. Who was the other one?
There was another employee of the Blaine Police Department. Don't recall his name. And there was another individual that came, and I would have to see.
Okay. Yeah, and I think you're aware of the geography in that area. Blaine is a small town, county of Granger, correct?
That's correct.
And Union County is a county over this.
That is correct.
Okay. And are you also aware that Tim Wyrick, and I'm not going to get too much detail, I promise. Tim Wyrick is a registered applicant for the sheriff's job in elections.
Yes, we were made aware, and that was actually discussed in the interview with Mr. Wyrick that day.
Okay, it was.
Yes.
Okay, and some decision, and we don't need to go into why and how, is that Tim Wyrick and the other officers that were at Blaine are not here today, correct?
That is correct.
They won't be testifying today.
Not as my knowledge. I don't know.
Okay, very good. And nothing they said was provided in discovery to us, right?
Your Honor, I'm going to object to that. I don't know how Mr. Fellow would know what was provided in discovery or not.
Sustained.
Okay. And then from there, from Blaine, you went over to Chief Deputy Smith's house.
That's correct.
And did you knock on the door?
No, sir.
You just drove the driveway and took some pictures?
We just drove by the residence being pulled in.
Okay. And you saw, if you look at that picture, you saw that white van?
Yes, sir.
And you saw a Crown Vic there too, right? A white one?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And you saw a Dodge Charger,
That's correct.
right? And you saw those three vehicles?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then you went to the Union County Sheriff's Department.
Yes, sir.
And then you commenced an investigation of the training program, right?
That's correct.
In fact, you did not sit Brian Smith down and talk to him about the car in his yard.
That's correct.
Make sure I'm correct. It's correct that you did not do that, right?
That's correct.
Okay. And when Brian Smith arrived, did he have a badge in his belt?
No, sir.
Do you have a weapon on the side?
No, sir.
Do you have a uniform in Union County on?
No, sir.
Do you have a shirt with any badge on it or anything?
Not to my recollection.
Was it plain clothes?
Yes, sir.
And the vehicle he was driving was a white van,
Yes, sir.
his own vehicle, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And what was he there for to determine to talk to you with? Did you ask for him or did he just arrive?
I believe we requested.
You requested?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so he came from some of the location, which you know to be his home, correct?
Yes, sir.
Come to Union County Sheriff.
Correct.
Okay. Did you ever inquire, and I'll be brief, did you ever inquire as to what else he was doing? Did you talk to him extensively about his role at that time? You were aware he was on suspension? It's a lot of questions, but were you aware he was on suspension?
We were aware that he was on suspension. Yes, sir.
But you did not investigate further his role in Union County Sheriff's Department at that time, correct?
We just understood it to be that he was working administratively, but again, we were there just to investigate the complaints and the training.
Okay. And the complaints were deemed not to be valid complaints.
Your Honor, I'm going to object to that. I don't know that Mr. Bello would know whether they were valid or not. That's for the commission to determine today.
Well, he can testify if he made a determination as to the complaint.
I can be word, in your
Okay.
opinion, the complaint's valid.
At the time, we did not find sufficient evidence to pursue that further.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Mr. Morrell?
Let's get about those two questions. We're very close, so I'll try
That's
to
all
make this one. Now, it was your testimony that you went to the Union County Sheriff's Office at the end of October, is that correct?
That's correct.
All right. And the purpose of that visit was because you had received those complaints that we had spoken about, correct?
That's correct.
All right. And when you went to the sheriff's office, you had requested certain documentation.
That's correct.
All right. Some of the requested documentation, the training records.
The training records we have in our system.
Okay. But any other documentation of what they were doing in training? Get copies of that while you're there?
No.
Had you been to the Union County Sheriff's Office between when this order went down in June and October of that year?
No.
Were you aware that part of that order was there was going to be frequent spot checks on the training records to make sure they're in compliance?
That's correct.
All right, but between June and October, nobody had come to Union County to check the records.
That's correct. And again, we have access to those records in our system.
Okay, but it was part of the order that you would come at least and check to make sure they were doing that.
That's correct.
Was it your understanding that they were supposed to reach out to you to make sure?
No, sir.
Your understanding that as part of that order, they would expect you to come make sure they're doing this job.
That's correct.
You all did not do that between then and October. Is that correct?
That's correct.
You didn't do that after October.
That's correct.
Have you ever made a spot check in Union County Sheriff's Department for the training?
Not outside that one time.
Was the purpose of that to come check on their training? Was the purpose of that meeting for you to go there because the complaints you received complaint?
That is the reason why we went and we did the spot check while we were there.
So you did not go there to check the training.
Not specifically, no, sir.
Never been there to check the training.
No, sir.
You had testified that they had never called you.
Correct.
And did you expect them to call? Did you expect that was what the order said that they were supposed to do? Is that how you understood that?
For assistance with their training or for the spot check?
Did you understand that their assistance with the spot checking was to make sure they're in compliance with the training?
Yes,
While you're there, you talked to Sheriff Breeding about the training program.
I did.
Did you have recommendations for the sheriff about what they could do on their training program?
No, sir.
Did you tell them they were doing a good job?
No, sir.
Tell them they're doing a bad job?
No, sir.
You had no advice whatsoever.
I just collected the data that was there under the direction of my assistant director when I was there.
Sheriff Breeding asked you how they were doing with their training?
Not that I recall.
Did he explain the steps they've been taking to expand and modernize the training?
Yes,
Explain to you if they had worked with other counties?
that's correct.
And you had no advice or recommendations at that time?
It was just our understanding that they were supposed to be working with somebody to improve their training. And he explained to me that they had reached out and were trying to follow up on it.
Did you think at the time in October when you came to that sheriff's department that they were not in compliance with the agreed order based on the information that Sheriff Breeding gave you about their training?
based on that they were supposed to be doing more in-person training, I would say that they were not compliant.
Did you tell the sheriff that they were not in compliance?
Not at that time.
Have you communicated at any time during this entire probationary period that they're not in compliance?
My records were turned over to the former assistant director at that time, who then proceeded to put steps to have this hearing happen.
You yourself never have reached out
I
to the
did not.
sheriff or anybody at the department to tell them that they're not in compliance?
No, sir.
Never offered any recommendations?
No, sir.
Now, you said you reviewed their training records for the 2021 year. That's correct?
That's correct.
This order went into effect in June of that year. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So their efforts to rehabilitate and expand and modernize their program started after that date,
That is correct.
halfway through that year, correct?
Yes.
Did you expect them to have it fixed within that year? Was that the expectation?
I think the expectation was them to move away from an online training platform.
Did they still have to have all their officers post-certified?
Yes,
As soon as the order went down and they had to change their training program, that requirement didn't change.
that's
They
correct.
weren't given grace or an extension or more time to make sure they could get that training program in place. Correct?
That's correct.
So they still have to have all those hours, correct?
Correct.
All right, and they still have to have a platform to get that done while they're changing the programs.
Yes,
Correct. And they had changed their program to one that is less likely to be used,
to my knowledge,
to
yes.
your knowledge. And they had made goals and strides toward getting more in-person training.
Yes,
And there are impediments to in-person training. Are there not?
during the pandemic, certainly.
This is the middle of a pandemic, so certain in-person training wasn't available at all.
Correct.
All right. Scheduling can be canceled.
Correct.
Or it wasn't scheduled at all.
Correct.
If they wanted to institute their own in-person training, there's impediments to that as well. Time impediments, correct?
Correct. You have to put it together and get proper instructors.
And that process takes time.
Yes,
That's also something you wouldn't expect to get done that first year.
Your Honor, I'm going to object to that. Whether or not they comply with the order, again, is the reason for the hearing today. It's up to the commission to determine that, not Mr. Bellow's opinion as to whether or not they comply with that order.
What was the question again, Mr. Morrell?
I'd asked,
About whether he should have done that or could have done that?
I think I can fix this, but
Okay,
rephrasing or moving on.
thank you.
When were they supposed to have their training program in a satisfactory position for us?
there was not a time frame given that I'm aware of.
Were there any dates to check to see if they had hit certain milestones?
No, sir, not that I'm aware of.
Is there a date that you're aware of anywhere in that order that they're supposed to be completed with the expansion modernization of their training program?
No, sir, not that I'm aware of.
So it's fair to say they still had time.
Again, Your Honor, I'm going to object to that.
Sustain.
Now, you've also reviewed the records for 2022 as well.
That's correct.
You had said that most of the training is still occurring online.
Correct.
What percentage?
I have to document.
Was there more in-person training occurring?
Yes,
Significantly more than the year before?
I don't know that I would call it significant, but there is more in-person training occurring this year.
It's fair to say that they had made progress on
Yes,
the in-person training.
correct.
All right. And especially while we're still in this probationary period for sheriff reading, they've still got time to make more progress.
Being that there's not a time frame given, I would just say yes.
There's no milestone when they're supposed to complete this.
That's correct.
What was the last date when you checked on their training for 2022?
Just a few days ago, beginning of the week, Monday.
All the questions after this.
Thank you. Any redirect, Ms. Cooper?
Just to be clear, Mr. Bello, as of Monday, the Union County Sheriff's Department is still predominantly doing their in-service and continuing education training online,
Correct.
with the exception of Sheriff Breeding, Chief Deputy Smith, and this third high-ranking individual.
It appears that they are doing some classes. There was, the general department was probably under 10 hours in-person training. But the administration had several more hours than that for in-person, correct?
And Mr. Morrell asked you about the timeframe in 2021, specifically when the order was entered, is that it was June 2021. Does that sound correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Were you working with the post commission throughout the calendar year of 2021?
I started in January of 2010.
Okay. Would it surprise you to learn that the initial notice of hearing the charges in this matter regarding the online training situation was actually filed in February of 2021?
Yes, I would have been very new to the job.
Okay. So even though the order wasn't entered until June of 2021, is it fair to say that this was an ongoing situation for the post commission for quite a bit of 2021?
Correct.
Okay. In your review of the training that the officers, the law enforcement officers in Union County did after June of 2021, did they switch to a majority of in-person training with another county or not, or did they switch to another online platform?
They went to another online platform,
And what platform is that?
Police One.
And is that the training that the majority of the rank and file officers of the Union County Sheriff's Department did in 2021?
That's correct.
Thank you, sir.
Can you recross?
Hang on.
Oh, thank you. You may sit down. Thank you, sir.
Commissioner.
Oh, you're right. I always forget. Sorry. Nope, back up. The commission members have the opportunity to ask questions of you. So, Mr. Chair, I will turn it over to you and the commission for any questions.
By yourself.
Thank you. Does any members have questions of Investigator Bello at this time? Okay. Commissioner Cherry, you're recognized.
Thank you, Commissioner Cherry. Investigator Bello, you went out to Union County based on some specific complaints that have been made. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Can you tell us what those specific complaints were?
The complaints were that Chief Deputy Smith was riding along in a patrol car on duty with another officer, that he was functioning in a law enforcement capacity, assisting in traffic stops, was using the radio sign of the officer that he was riding with, and that they were still not doing in-person training. So we went out there based on those complaints.
Okay. Did you find some specific evidence that there had been with ride-alongs, of course? I mean, sometimes civilians ride along with officers. That could be a situation where, right, actually acting as a police officer.
Certainly.
Did you have some specific incidents that you were able to establish that this had happened?
The incidents that we found that he had responded to scenes, one could argue that he was serving in an administrative capacity, which is why we did not pursue those further. I believe one was a crash that involved a deputy, and we were not presented with any other further evidence that would lead us to pursue that avenue. So it was left.
So is it fair to say that as a result of your investigation, those complaints were not substantiated by your investigation?
That's correct.
Okay, so that leaves us just with the training issue.
Correct.
With the training issue, there's been some discussion here about how there was some kind of understanding that it was to go more to personal training as opposed to online training. Is that your understanding?
That was my understanding, yes.
Were you operating based on anything aside from the agreed order that had been signed by all parties, or was there something else?
That was the only thing that we were using as guidance.
And maybe you can give me some guidance here, because when I look at the order, it says that responder breeding will work with the sheriff's office, blah, 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 to establish a training program that will work with another county to expand and modernize the training of deputies while also minimizing potential abuses of that program. But unless I'm missing it somewhere, I don't see anything that talks about making it more in person as opposed to online. And it sounds like they modernized, at least arguably modernized, by moving to a different program where there'd be less opportunity for abuse. So can you kind of give me some enlightenment on that?
Don't know that the police one platform is any better or worse than the V Academy platform. Online is online. I wouldn't say that it's more modern or behind the V Academy platform that they left. It was my understanding and direction under Assistant Director Mines that they were supposed to move away from online training because of the potential for abuse and what had happened to more in-person training.
But that specific requirement is not in the order. Is that your understanding, or I don't know if you can answer that?
You are correct.
All right, thank you.
Yes.
Any other commissioners? Commissioner Foster, you're recognized.
Good, after this, in regards to the legal use of the Dodge Charger, what distinguishing features will that be able to make you believe it was what?
Had a government tag on it.
Were there any other items on the vehicle that were indicative of police vehicle?
Don't recall. I'd have to look at the picture again. Nothing right now stands out to me as far as like a spotlight or anything, lights or anything of that nature. You can tell it's a government vehicle, but I'd have to look at the picture again to see if there was any lights or anything like that stood out to me at the time.
All right, second question, in regard to the incident you said related to a crash, while you're investigating that, did you review the policies and procedures?
We did not.
You did not. Was there any indication that in any other instance of a crash that an administrator would be sent the same as opposed to full law enforcement official?
It seemed logical to me, which is why it was not pursued any further.
Any other questions? Investigator, this is Commissioner Parton. So on your trip up there that day, there was you, Director Mines, and Investigator Cooper, correct?
That's correct.
And the first place you went was to the Blaine Police Department,
That's correct.
and you spoke with certain individuals.
That's correct.
Okay. What is the, what was the, and they're in another county, is it Granger County?
I believe so.
Did they explain to you why they called? What is their interest? On your personal observation, what is their interest and involvement with the Union County Sheriff's Office?
I believe Tim Wyrick, who's the chief of Blaine, is a resident of Union County.
Okay. And he was well aware of the sanctions that was put on the sheriff and the chief deputy back a year or so ago.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Did he indicate to you that he had personally seen the chief or the sheriff, or particularly the chief in this matter, conduct law enforcement matters out of compliance?
Not to my knowledge.
Did he give any written statements or affidavits?
Don't believe you provided any written statements.
Did anybody that was a complainant give any written statements or affidavits to you or any of the other investigators?
They did not.
Thank you. Any further questions from any of the other commissioners?
Ms. Cooper, any redirect,
No, ma'am.
any recross?
One question. Just talked about Tim Wyrick, correct?
That's correct.
I think you answered this already, but let me one more time. He is a registered applicant for election for sheriff in Union County, correct?
I believe so. Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Bello. You're free to sit down this time.
Your Honor, I don't anticipate having any further questions for Mr. Bello, and I understand he actually has a plane to catch. So if they don't have any other questions, I was going to ask him to be released.
You are released. Thank you, sir. Your next witness, Ms. Cooper. And commission members, I see y'all, some of you leaning into your microphone. You need to turn your microphone on. So I appreciate the gesture, but that is particularly helpful to the court reporter. So there's a person with something coming out of their mouth.
I'll have to talk into yours.
Exactly, that's fine. Your next witness, Ms. Cooper.
Would be investigator Cooper.
Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you?
Yes.
Thank you. You may proceed, Ms. Cooper.
Thank you. Would you state your name for the record, please?
Catherine Cooper.
And where do you work, ma'am?
I work for the Tennessee Post Commission, Tennessee Law Enforcement Training County.
And what do you do for those organizations?
I still instruct occasionally next door. I teach one class for the basic, and as an investigator, I help process paperwork, conduct investigations, and I'm primarily responsible for processing the salaries.
And we'll get salary supplement in just a moment. But can you tell the commission about, we've heard that you were along for the trip in October of 2021, is that correct?
Yes.
And can you tell the commission about your involvement in that trip to Union County?
I went with the previous assistant director, Dexter Mines, and with investigator Bello. We traveled to Union County because from what my understanding was, we had received some complaints about Mr. Smith working in a police capacity, making some traffic stops, possibly be involved in some other incidences, and then also to check on their training to see what they were doing, what they were turning in, and it's pretty much the reason, from my understanding, why we went.
And so would you concur with Investigator Bello that when you got to Union County, you first went to Chief Deputy Smith's home?
We first went to Blaine.
Okay, I'm sorry. So you first went to the Blaine Police Department.
Correct.
All right, and tell the commissioners about that.
We arrived there, I believe Mr. Myrick was already there, greeted us. There was two other gentlemen that ended up, I do not remember their names off the top of my head. I was not the primary investigator on this case, but I do remember bits and pieces of the interviews or what we talked about when we were at Blaine. I do remember that Mr. Wyrick had said that I actually asked him.
I don't want to get into hearsay at this point, but as a result of your conversations with the individuals at the Blaine Police Department, what did you do then?
We went and drove by Mr. Smith's residence, and I believe Dexter Mines took some photos.
Have you seen those photos here today?
Yes.
Okay. Are they accurate? You also saw that photo.
Yes.
Bicycle car there?
The black photo. I don't know if I was surprised.
Pretty good. Are those good?
Is there someone participating remotely?
She's in charge of people.
Okay, yes.
Because we received information that he had been working, I don't necessarily think I was surprised. Maybe disappointed, but not surprised.
After passing by Chief Deputy Smith's home and seeing the charger there, what did you do then?
We went to Union County Sheriff's Office.
Okay. And who did you meet with when you got there?
We were greeted by a police officer. I'm not sure if he was an investigator or just a police officer. We went to a room and waited for Mr. Smith and Mr. Breeden to arrive.
Okay. Who arrived first, if you recall?
I believe it was Mr. Smith that arrived first.
And did you have a conversation with Chief Deputy Smith about why you were there?
I did not. The director at the time did. He advised him why we were there and what we were doing.
Okay. And what did Chief Deputy Smith have to say about that?
He didn't Nothing. He was just complying, so that he would, help or ask or answer any questions that we had.
When did you do that?
We waited in that room for a little bit of time. I believe somewhere the next 10 to 15 minutes, Mr. King arrived, and he was, I guess, trying to help provide more information on the training and what they've been doing.
When you were speaking with Chief Deputy Smith, did you ask for any documentation?
Not until he and I had went to another area of the building, and I was collecting pay stubs or timesheet that they might have had there at the police department.
And why were you doing that?
To see if they had turned in time, to see when they were working, when they weren't working, to see if we could maybe corroborate with any of this information we had gotten when they had been out working on patrol or making traffic stops, and that those timesheets would indicate that they were actually working during those same time frames.
You've heard from the questioning of the attorneys that the argument is that Chief Deputy Smith was still working in an administrative capacity. Based on the timesheets that you were provided by, I think it was Ms. Jackson of the Finance Department, were you able to determine whether he was working as a law enforcement officer or an administrative capacity, or was that noted anywhere on those pages?
It wasn't noted, so I mean, without being noted what capacity he was working in, we just knew he was working hours.
At any point, did you check to see if his being Chief Deputy Smith's status in ACADIS was updated to any kind of change of status?
I don't recall if I did. I believe that was something that the previous assistant director had.
And you were provided timesheets and payroll information by Ms. Jackson?
Correct.
Okay. And it's already been admitted, I believe it's exhibit number 4. But I want to show you. Ms. Cooper, is that the timesheet summary? It's the first page of the 70 pages that have been provided. Is that looking?
Yes.
Okay. And I would direct you to the date. Can you tell what the date is?
7/5/2020.
Okay. And who were the first 2 names on that sheet?
Sheriff Billy Green, Chief Brian Smith.
And does it say how many hours? Just again, this is repeated throughout the 70 pages. So does it say that Chief Deputy Smith is working for the Union County Sheriff's Department?
Yes.
And during that 2 weeks, he worked on 80. Now, during your time with Sheriff Breeding or Chief Deputy Smith, did they ever say to you, or was a conversation ever had with either one of them about what capacity Chief Deputy Smith was working in?
No, I wasn't there during the interviews that were conducted with Mr. Breeding or Mr. Smith by my peer or Mr. Mines. I had went to the other side of the building, gathering all the paperwork out of the file cabinet, helping unstaple it, staple back together. I mean, it took a considerable amount of time to get through it because all that had been stapled. So we were trying to unstaple it, scan it, to be able to collect it.
Okay. In the brief period of time that you, excuse me, that you were alone with or just speaking with Chief Deputy Smith, was any conversation had about what his duties were or why you were there?
No, it wouldn't have been an appropriate time.
Okay, explain that for me, please.
This will be my 22nd year in investigations, June 23rd next month. Would not have been the appropriate time to conduct an investigation in a room where I'm collecting files out of a file cabinet with him. It would have been more appropriate to have sat down and conducted a formal interview with him and made him aware of what I was asking him about and been able to properly document that conversation.
That did not happen on this.
No.
Did not happen on the subsequent list.
No.
In addition to the payroll records, did you collect any other documentation that day regarding that training?
No, I did not.
Did you at any point come into contact with GDI?
Yes.
Okay, can you tell the commission about that conversation?
Mr. King had walked in. I spent maybe 5 minutes or less with him prior to going and collecting the documents. And he was very proud of what he had been trying to get going for Union County. In that conversation, he openly told me that they were doing online training, that they had started using the Police One. And I had asked him, I said, are y'all doing any in-person training? Because I was under the impression that they were supposed to start doing more in-person training as opposed to the online training. He said, no, that was before his time. But he did say that he was trying to create more in-person training moving forward.
Any other conversations with Sheriff Reading or Chief Deputy Smith?
No.
Have you had an opportunity since meeting with them back in late October, early November, to do a review of Union County Sheriff's Department training for 2021?
Uh-huh.
And did you compile a report of that training?
I did.
Did you submit that to me? Provide it
Yes.
to me? And so at this time, I would ask, let's take a look at exhibit previously provided to you all, the Union County completed training category. Cooper, have you seen this before?
Yes.
And you tell judge and the commissioners what you're looking at.
This is a export from Cadus that breaks down officers training. It breaks down by category and it breaks down by hour. And it will also show the amount of hours per category of training an officer has attended.
And is this for the 2021 calendar year?
Yes.
And when you exported this report, does it only show Union County and their officers and their training?
Yes, we have the ability from Cadus to export it for it to be per agency or for it to also show the 18,000 plus some odd officers we have working in the state agency.
And at this time, Your Honor, I would ask that be entered as the next exhibit. And Ms. Cooper, if you could have permission to step away and bring that up on her screen.
Any objection, council?
Objection.
No.
I'll accept the completed training hours by person for the year 2021 as exhibit number 7. Commission members, again, it's entitled Union County Completed Training by Category Report 2021.
Ms. Cooper, in reviewing that record, can you tell the commission anything about how much of that training was done online, if it was done online, with what platform, and how much of it was done in person?
So for 2021, it's approximately 64% of the training was conducted online. There was a little bit more with the use of Police One as opposed to the Academy. But again, those online training platforms are very, very similar. I don't really believe that one to be better than the other. I do know that Mr. Rudy had completed almost everything, but about 10% in person for the 2021 calendar year. And then I do believe there was 2 other administrative employees who had completed a considerable amount in person. But everybody else in the agency, again, it was roughly 64% had completed everything online.
Do you notice any difference in what platform they were using prior to June 2021 to after?
they had switched most of their training from the academy to the police one platform.
And in order to get there, in order for they being a law enforcement officer in the state of Tennessee, they have to meet certain mandates, correct?
Correct.
And in order for them to get those salary supplements, their GDI has to do what?
He has to submit the training through the ACADIS portal. First, the training has to be approved as post-approved training. Once it's approved, then the GDI is able to enter that training as an attended training, creates a roster of all the officers who have attended it, submitted to us. Our employees review that, and as long as everything looks appropriate, then those officers are given credit for those hours.
And are you the primary person responsible for making sure that those salary supplements are in order?
Yes.
The report that you just, that was just entered into evidence, was that being used, or is that going to be used to justify the 2021 salary supplements?
Yes, I refer to that to look to see which officers are in compliance and which are not.
Okay. Were you aware that Union County was denied their 2020 supplement as a result of the prior incident that we discussed?
Yes.
Okay. Has Union County already submitted their salary supplement materials for 2021?
Yes.
And who did that?
Mr. Q.
Okay. And when that was submitted, did you notice anything about that salary supplement at the roster?
It originally had Mr. Brian Smith listed on it as eligible. Mr. Brian Smith should not have been listed as eligible because he was not working in a police capacity. So he would have been listed on the ineligible list of the salary supplement.
Did you point that out to him?
I did. We had training about a month ago in Blunt County. Mr. King attended that, and he and I had a discussion about the salary supplement. He has since corrected it and sent me the roster showing Mr. Smith on the ineligible list.
But to be clear, when it was originally submitted, Chief Deputy Smith was on there as an eligible law enforcement officer for 2021.
Correct. That's all I have.
Very brief. So I represent Brian Smith, as you well know, I think. You say when you were at the scene, Blaine's incident initially in October, correct?
Yes.
Do you recall personally what county Blaine's in?
Union County, I would assume, but I'm not sure geographically. I'll just off the top of my head.
So it was surprising to know that it's actually in Granger.
It wouldn't surprise me. I wouldn't know right or wrong from that. I wouldn't know, just going to blame not being the lead detective in the case. I wouldn't really.
Okay. You are a peer of Inspector Bella.
Correct.
And you respect him, don't you? And you, of course, believe everything he's just said, you agree with, didn't you?
Your Honor, I'm
No,
object
I'm
asking
just trying to
if
short
there's-
circuit, Your Honor.
she's already said she doesn't know what county it's in, so I'm not sure what more she can add to that.
Well, let me be more specific. You heard Inspector Bello say that he heard some complaints at the Blaine Police Department, correct?
Yes.
And then in answer to my questions, and those are an answer to Commissioner's questions, he stated that they later turned out to be unsubstantiated, correct?
Yes.
And there were never any further follow-up on this.
Not that I'm aware.
But you certainly didn't do it. Did you?
No.
Okay. And when you went to the Union County Sheriff's Department to follow up on, well, let's step back. You actually first went to Chief Deputy Smith's home. Did you?
No, we first just blame.
I'm sorry, Blaine, then you went to his home, correct?
Correct.
I'm sorry. And you took these pictures. What are you talking about?
The previous assistant director did.
Okay. Okay. But you were there, correct?
I was in the backseat. Yes.
You saw these three things, these three vehicles, correct?
Yes.
The white van, the Crown Vic, and his Charger, correct? Okay. And when you got to the Union County Sheriff's Department, you waited there for Brian and the sheriff to get there, right?
Yes.
Said Brian, Chief Deputy Smith,
Yes.
right? And he did get there. I hate to have to ask you this again, it's redundant. He had no weapon, he had no badge, correct?
Not that I recall.
He was in plain clothes, correct? You recall what he was driving?
I do not. I did not. I didn't go out to look.
Okay. And you say now that you conducted no interrogation or interview of Chief Deputy Smith regarding his role under his suspension.
Correct.
So you have no rough notes of that?
No, I do not.
So there's no interview statements for that?
I did not interview him.
Okay, did anyone else there?
Not, I wasn't with the other two. I wasn't with my peer or the previous assistant director during this conversation.
You were taking staples
So,
out
I
inside
don't-
that place, right?
No, sir, I was gathering the documents. I was out.
Okay, I'm going to show you a potential exhibit, just for identification only. And I just wanted to ask you if you identify, if you recognize.
Maybe I may have read this. I don't know.
You may have read it in anticipation of litigation, or did you read it back then?
Possibly back then.
Did you maybe ask the sheriff if there was anything that actually officially suspended the constable?
Again, I wasn't conducting the investigation.
Okay. Just 1 second if I could, Your Honor. Brian Smith was right there in the room with you all, in the sheriff's department, correct?
I was briefly with them.
And you were, okay, but your other investigators were too, right?
Yes.
No further questions, thank you.
Mr. Moreau?
Investigator Cooper, was your testimony when you went out there in October to the Union County Sheriff's Department? Did have a chance to speak to Officer King?
Yes,
You had said that he was very, very proud of his training.
very special.
Say that he was, fair to say that he was kind of excited about the training program.
He was.
Wanted to show you the things they were doing.
He did.
He asked for advice on things to get better.
No, I did not have a lot of time to talk to him because I pretty quickly went and started trying to collect the documents.
You didn't offer any advice.
I advised him that I was under the impression that they were supposed to start trying to incorporate more in-person training and moving away from the online platforms.
And again, it's not part of the order that they complete X amount of in-person training, X percentage of in-person training.
You asked me the question.
Yes.
I don't think that it's there's a percentage document.
Is in-person training mentioned in the order at all?
Without reading it right now, I don't know. I would have to read it to review it.
Your testimony, you're under the impression that in-person training is supposed to be occurring. Where did you get that impression?
Well, I think because they had conducted all of their training online up to that point, and it had been abused for cheating. It was logical to think that to prevent that, they would have to do some other type of training. The only other type of training available for law enforcement agency is in-person training. So it would be reasonable to think that that would be the type of training that would be the next best option. And it was also kind of in general conversation that they would go get help from sistering agencies.
But it was never explicitly stated by yourself that they were supposed to do in-person.
I had a conversation with Mr. King that I was under the impression that they were supposed to be utilizing different training ways to get their training completed, because the online training has previously been, such an issue.
But it's fair to say that's different than the order requires.
Your Honor, I'm going to object to that because she's already answered that she wouldn't know unless she's reading the order what it says.
Sustained, you're welcome to make those arguments and closing arguments, Mr. Moreau.
Now, you testified that there was a training supplement that was submitted by Officer Cooper. Correct. You had notified him that Chief Deputy Smith was miscategorized on that.
We had training in Black County. When we did the training, Mr. King and I, he had came up to me and we were just reviewing, going over training. The training specifically intended was to help GDIs know how to put training in the computer, how post processes that. And he came up and speaking with me. I looked at it, he showed it to me on his computer, and he actually said, well, now that I've had this training, I think I've got some things wrong with here. And when we started reviewing it, we started talking about Brian.
So he had reached out to you and said, I'd like your help on this. At least said, here's what I've got.
Yeah, well, he came up and we were just talking about the.
So he's, he had questions, he was willing to reach out to somebody else to help answer those questions.
It would have been about a month ago, yeah.
Seemed like he wanted to get it right.
Yeah, I think he does want to get it right.
He took your advice, and made changes.
Absolutely.
Fair to say if you advised him to do something, you would do it. That we want, folks want you to do this.
Yeah, I mean, from my interaction I had with him a month ago, month and a half ago, we looked at the errors that were on the supplement that we had provided. And since then, he has sent me another supplement that's been corrected.
Got you. Okay, so as far as him being listed on that supplement, at least as I understand it, you might correct me if I'm wrong, it's that you had to be at least 8 months, officer, 8 months to be on there.
Well, there's lots of stipulations. So then I'll be eligible or not eligible. When they complete their instruction training, they don't complete their instruction training.
So it's fair to say that's complicated.
It would be very complicated, yes.
Okay. And Chief Deputy Smith at that time had been, I believe, about 6 months after his suspension. Is that correct?
I don't know the exact dates. I have to go back and look at it. Review it.
Yeah, it was probably a few months shy of that particular rule.
I don't know. I would have to go back and look to see exactly when he went out, and exactly how much time he had working in full-time capacity, and then two, when he would have completed all of his in-service training. If he's not working in a complete police capacity, I would have to go back and look to see when he completed in-service training. If he completed in-service training prior to going out, that would be, one thing. If he completed in-service training afterwards, that would come into play too. Like,
That's something as Officer King is a newer GDI, is going to have to, reach out to other people, get assessments, get that straightened out. And then it appears that, I believe he actually did so. Correct.
well, we had a conversation at the one time.
Now you had talked a little bit about percentages of training as far as online and in person. And you had made the distinction that Chief Deputy Smith and Sheriff Breeding, Officer King, Officer Lawson had completed more of their training online than the regular officers. Is that correct?
No, they completed less.
The other way, I apologize.
Correct.
In person. Now, as far as in-person training for regular officers, there are some logistical concerns with that. Correct? They've got to
I
be on
don't
patrol.
know what the religious concerns are. They've not been expressed to me.
At some point, they're on patrol. They work shifts.
Sure.
Okay. And Union County Sheriff's Department is a smaller sheriff's department compared to other departments in the area.
They're smaller, probably about average. We have agencies that have 1 or 2 people.
It's not a major metropolitan.
No.
Okay. That's fair. So when you do in-person training, of course, some of your officers can't be on patrol. They gotta get trained.
Yeah, I would hope they're not the best signal.
That would be very bad, especially for the county. So having a smaller department and having fewer officers available, you don't have the luxury of seeing them all the training.
I don't see how you could send them all at one time.
You have to have somebody patrolling the streets.
Right.
The police. Whereas opposed to if you're an administrator and you weren't working shift work, you might have more ability to do that.
Water, I'm gonna
The
object
load of
to-
your administrative tasks.
I'm gonna object to this line of questioning. She said, essentially, she's guessing at this point. She doesn't have personal knowledge of these things. I don't think she's the best witness to testify to what's going on inside the Union County Sheriff's Department and when they get some people to training.
It's a state.
That's all I have.
Redirect, Ms. Cooper.
Mr. Investigator Cooper, as part of your investigation into when and how training was done, did you you look at the individual training histories of both Sheriff Reading and Chief Deputy Smith? Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And again, just to be clear, they've done the majority of their training both in 2021 and 2022 in person.
Yes.
Unlike the other 20-something law enforcement officers on that report that have the majority of theirs online.
There's been 25 officers. This year, it's somewhere roughly around 70% been completed online. so far.
That's all that I have.
Recross?
I just have one question, just to make sure I'm correct. You were there and Chief Smith got the station and he offered to answer any questions you all had, right? He was cooperating.
Yes, he was.
Okay. You all just chose not to talk about that particular area of investigation. It's rolling on, or you don't know.
I don't know what they chose to not talk about.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Morrell, any recross?
No, Your Honor.
Board members, any questions for Ms. Cooper?
Commissioner Chair, you recognize.
Thank you. Just a couple of questions. Investigator Cooper, you had mentioned that the GDI, the new GDI, was very proud of advances made in the training program. Do you remember specifically what advances that he claimed it made? I mean, we moved to a different online program, but was there anything else that we had implemented to try to avoid abuse of the program or fraud on the program or anything like that?
No, in my opinion, I don't think that he felt that going to another online platform was a negative thing or a bad thing. He just openly said it, and that's when I said, well, I think you guys are supposed to be trying to move away from online platforms and have more in-person training to prevent what happened before.
Did he mention any other things that he had done to try to avoid people basically defrauding the system by cheating on the program?
He didn't have a lot of information. I can recall him saying this was before my time. A lot of that happened before my time.
One other question. There's been some discussion about the, and if I understand this right, it was people being categorized as being eligible for the training supplement, and Chief Deputy was on that list and shouldn't have been on that list. Is that kind of what we were talking about?
Yeah, without having to sit and look at the actual salary supplement and when he did his training, when he didn't do his training, and when he was out, when he could actually technically could be working. All those things kind of go into play with it.
So when we're talking about somebody being eligible for the salary supplement, and you work with that all the time, right?
Yes.
So you're much better versed with that than I would be. But to be eligible for the training supplement, I think the big thing people are looking at is, hey, I've got to get my in-service in. Is that correct? Would you have to be functioning in a law enforcement capacity to attend the training?
It's a good question. Typically in past, when an officer is attending in-service training, they're working in a police capacity. Typically when officers are placed on some type of administrative leave, which maybe this situation could be equated to that, they're not doing police in-service training.
But for somebody who's working in the office, I mean, I'm just trying to figure out, what would the situation have been that would make him feel like, hey, I can't get my supplement if he's able to participate in training and work on a full-time basis, yet the certification is suspended. Does that seem to be kind of a confusing situation?
It can be. Again, I don't know when he completed all his training. I'll have to go back and look at the specific dates of when he completed training. I just don't know off the top of my head.
Thank you.
Commissioner Forrester.
Well, my microphone's not working. So a couple of questions. You said you pulled the payroll for the 7 weeks, right?
Yes.
Was there a rank on the payroll when you pulled it?
I don't recall if it actually have rank, just listed the names.
Okay. And what about the salary supplement? Is a rank listed on the salary supplement?
Sometimes.
Sometimes. Do you remember if it was listed in this case?
I believe some of their officers have rank listed.
Do you remember what Brian Smith's rank was on the initial salary supplement that was submitted?
I do not.
Commissioner Green.
The official record that y'all keep for law enforcement officers, Union County ever changed the status? Chief Smith on sworn.
That's not something that I typically process. So I don't know the exact dates or times that the status would have been changed. I don't process that piece.
Go back to what Commissioner Cherry asked. Normally, non-sworn folks submit in service training.
Yes,
It's only for sworn.
right.
So at that time period, they were submitting, but it was unsuspension. It would seem to indicate that he was still in the sworn capacity.
It would indicate that he was doing police training in an unsworn capacity.
That's all right.
Any other commissioners? This is Commissioner Partner. Investigator Cooper, is it your responsibility or this body or any member of this building's responsibility to change the statuses and ACADAS for departments or any individual officers?
No,
Is it any of our responsibility or your responsibility to see that they get their in-service training done?
no,
Is it this body's responsibility or your responsibility to see that any sanctions put forth by this body are to be done, and particularly this case with Union County?
we're not going out. It would be their responsibility to comply.
And I heard you testify that you oversee approximately 18,000 or 19,000 law enforcement officers salary supplements in this state. Did I hear you testify to that?
There's a little more than 20,000 considering everybody that's considered an eligible list, part-timers.
Do you,
Service.
how many counties are in this state, Investigator Cooper? If I helped you, if I said 95, would you agree with me?
Yes.
Okay. Also, of those 95, there's 95 sheriff's offices. Is that correct?
Yes,
Of those 95 sheriff's offices, how many? Let me rephrase the question. How many post investigators do we have?
right now we have two.
You have
We
two,
have two part-timers.
and you had an executive director at the time of this investigation. Is that correct?
That's correct.
During that time, is it to where you can file that you investigators can follow up on every complaint that comes in to this building, to this office? And being that this was a complaint filed by whoever in Blaine, Tennessee, was that in the opening statement, I think I heard Ms. Cooper say the two highest law enforcement officers in Union County. Did that heighten the alert to your office to go and follow up on that?
I think it's alarming if a person is working in a police capacity that is not in sworn.
Did you think that at the time that the informal committee met in the original case, that was a really good deal that their legal counsel got them?
Yes.
No further questions.
Judge, I have a follow-up question.
Hold on one second.
Any other commissioners have questions of this witness? I'll turn it over to you.
Ms. Cooper, any redirect based on those questions?
I do, I just want to clarify something to follow up on Sheriff Barton's question regarding the payroll information. I believe that has already been exhibit number 4. I'm going to approach this, sorry, with you. It's fine. Ms. Cooper, again, I'm going to direct your attention to these payroll records. The top of page 1, you can tell the date again. 7/5/21. The payroll records that you obtained, were they payroll records during the time that Chief Deputy Smith would have been suspended? Yes. And is that why they were relevant to your investigation? If you were able to do that? Yes. And if you can tell the commission members what is the top 2 names on that list, and if you could read them exactly as they're on there.
Sheriff Billy Breeding and Chief Brian Smith.
Does Chief Brian Smith's name or title change as you go through the dates of these payroll records?
No,
without scrolling through again, all 70 pages, did Chief Deputy Smith sign off on some of the payroll requests and extra time to, or overtime requests and things like that in his capacity as Chief Deputy Smith?
Yes.
And again, this would be all during the time that he is supposed to be suspended as a certified officer.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Owen.
Sorry for jumping ahead. Just to follow up on some of the commissioners' questions. In order for Chief Deputy Smith to get his post certification back in 2022, you have to show that he's done his training.
Yeah, well, I don't, without reading it, I don't know off the top of my head exactly what it says. I would have to look back and read it.
Was a certified officer from January to June.
Yes, I believe that.
I mean, Mr. Owen, you said 2022. like 2022.
Yeah, sorry.
Any other recross? Okay. Any redirect based on that question?
No, ma'am.
All right, thank you, Ms. Cooper. You're free to sit down. Your next witness, Ms. Cooper.
Would be Officer Brogan, if he's still online. And it's been a little while.
Is he participating by video or just telephone?
I'm on the video, ma'am.
Ms. Cooper, can we pull him up, please, so that the commission members can see him? while he's-
Officer Brogan, we're getting you rung up on the screen here. If you can just give us a minute.
Yes, ma'am.
It's timed out. Happened when I was up there testifying. I don't want to have to restart it. I'm afraid we may lose everybody.
Oh, so you,
We can hear them, but I can't get the video to refresh right now.
I'm sorry, commission members, you won't be able to see the witness as he testifies. Sir, I need you to place you under oath. If you'll please raise your right hand.
Yes, ma'am.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you?
I do.
Thank you. You may proceed, Ms. Cooper.
Officer Brogan, would you state your name for me, please?
Jonathan Tyler Brogan.
And where do you work, sir?
I work for Plainview Police Department
And how long have you worked for the Plainview Police Department?
since April 4th of this year,
And what county is that in, sir?
Union County.
And prior to April 4th of this year, did you work for the Union County Sheriff's Department?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you tell the commission members how long and when you worked for the Union County Sheriff's Department?
I can actually not recall a specific time, but I know I finished the academy in December of 2020.
And were you working with the Union County Sheriff's Department at that time?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and if I told you that there was an indication in your CADIS file that you resigned on or about June 7th of 2021 and came back in August of 2021, does that sound about right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so from August of 2021 until late March of this year, did you work for the Union County Sheriff's Department?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, did you resign in good standing, sir?
Excuse me, ma'am?
Did you resign in good standing at the end of March?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and why'd you do that?
Just a personal, better job opportunity.
Okay, and so from August of 2021 until March of 2022, who were your supervisors or who was in charge there at Union County?
My direct supervisor was Sergeant Jerry Lawson. I was the SRO at the time. And then, of course, Brian Smith and Billy Breeden was in the office.
Okay, and as far as you knew, what was the status of Mr. Chief Deputy Smith?
During that time period?
Yes, sir.
During that time period, I figured he was still the chief and stuff like that.
Okay, did you or in the department, was there any kind of notice that was sent out that said, don't involve Chief Smith in any kind of chain of command decisions?
I really can't say if there was at that time.
Okay. Were you, you said you were an SRO. Did you work patrol as well, sir?
Yes, ma'am, when the school was not in session.
Okay. Tell the commission a little bit about that. How big is that department, sir?
I'd say just off the top of my head, not exact numbers, anywhere from as far as maybe 20 to 30 deputies.
Okay. And so kind of an all hands on deck situation. Does that sound right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And you testified a second ago that when school is not in session, that you would work patrol. Is that correct? Or is that me putting words in your mouth? I want to be accurate.
No, ma'am, that is correct. When school was not in session, I was on the patrol.
Okay. And so I want to talk specifically about an incident on November 4th of 2021. Do you recall that, or us discussing that at least?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And could you tell the commission a little bit about that and how you ended up out at a house involving a child, sir?
Yes, ma'am. Would it be okay if I refer back to my narrative on my report?
Okay. And if you'll give me just a minute. Officer Brogan, I did send you what appeared to be a screenshot of a narrative report. Does that sound correct?
Yes, ma'am.
You have that there in front of you?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And have you had a chance to review it?
Yes, ma'am.
And who wrote that report?
I did, ma'am.
Okay. And did you write it contemporary? Let me rephrase. Did you write it that same day, the next day? When was that report written about that incident?
I believe that report was wrote right after the call, ma'am.
Okay. If you'll give me just a minute. And Your Honor, this was part of another bulk exhibit that I'll take out and submit as just that page. Okay. But if you could, Mr. Brogan, I'm back, sorry. If you could tell the commission a little bit about that incident on November 4th and what happened there.
Yes, ma'am. On November 4th of 2021, I was dispatched to address 231 on Wolfenbarger Lane. There was a child that was stating to E911 that he couldn't wake up his dad, and that he couldn't unlock the front or the back door, and that he couldn't reach it. And so I went to the address, and the software was pinging it. At Unicode 911, the software was pinging the address at 231. And when I arrived there, Plainview City Police Chief Ford was in the driveway, and the child stated that he could see the police outside his door. And due to the totality of the circumstances, I contacted 702 Union County Chief Deputy Smith, and Chief Smith advised me to make entry into the residence due to the circumstances. And then once I made entry into 231 Wolfenbarger Lane, there was no one in that residence, and it was learned that the residence beside 231, which was 225 Wolfenbarger Lane, ended up being the right residence for the call.
Okay, and you mentioned 702. What is 702, sir?
702 was Chief Deputy Smith's number, to my knowledge.
Okay, and just to be clear, why did you call Chief Deputy Smith and not somebody else that day?
I figured with his knowledge and stuff like that within law enforcement that I would give him a call and see what he would like for me to do.
Okay, was he in your chain of command, sir?
At that time, I figured he was, ma'am.
Okay, had no reason to believe otherwise.
No, ma'am.
You said that he told you to go ahead and make entry, is that right?
Yes, ma'am. That's what my report reads.
Okay, do you recall making entry into the house?
Yes, ma'am.
How'd you do that?
With a screwdriver from Chief Ford's vehicle.
All right, and Chief Ford is the chief of police of the department you work at now, is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And Officer Brogan, the picture that I sent you of your report, you have that in front of you?
Yes, ma'am.
Have you seen it before I sent it to you?
Yes, ma'am.
And when was that?
I don't know the exact date. I can get that real quick if you'd like me to.
Just a general idea would be fine.
A couple weeks ago.
Okay, and how did that come to happen?
Received a picture from it from Brian Smith's cell phone to my cell phone.
Okay, so Chief Deputy Smith reached out to you about that picture?
Yes, ma'am. He actually, we talked about it.
Was that in person or over the phone, or how did that come to be?
We talked about it in person, ma'am.
Can you tell the commission how that happened?
Yes, ma'am. I was patrolling for the police department that I work for now, Plainview City Police. When I was shooting radar, and Chief Brian Smith pulled in and was talking to me, asking me how I liked the new department. He was saying, "Hey, he just let me know that I was on a witness list for post, and that I was asking what about, and he said it was pertaining to this call, and I asked him if I'd done anything wrong. He said no. He said it was about stuff that was going on with the with post, and said that his lawyers may be getting in contact with me."
Okay, and just to be clear, you asked him if you had done anything wrong back in November by calling him, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And he said, no, you hadn't.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. You remember what car he was driving when he pulled up next to you and asked you that question a couple weeks ago?
When he was that specific day, he was driving a blacked out Dodge Charger.
Your Honor, this time I'd ask that that picture be entered as the next exhibit, and again, I'll pull it out of the.
Any objections?
No.
And so is this in the previous?
What has, yes, ma'am, I'm
Okay.
sorry, that's my fault for not separating this out for you, I
So-
apologize for that, but,
It's the. Do you know which page number it is, Ms.
I
Cooper?
will find out right now.
Okay.
Let's see.
I want to make sure I'm looking at the same thing.
Yes, ma'am. That's going to be page 4 of 7.
So commissioners, this was titled Union County Picks, Call Details and Car. I've previously accepted into evidence pages 6 and 7. You are now able to look at the page number 4. I will accept that as exhibit number 8. Ms. Cooper will send that to me later.
Yes, ma'am.
Any other questions, Ms. Cooper, for your witness?
Just briefly, Officer Brogan, do you recall doing in-service training with Union County in 2021?
Yes, ma'am.
Can you tell the commission how you completed your in-service training?
I was using Police One, and I think some hours was possibly on V Academy.
Okay, so you think you did a little bit of both?
Yes, ma'am.
Were you ever given any instructions as to upcoming in-service that would be in person, or the reason for why you needed to move over to Police One?
No, ma'am.
Okay, so never any explicit instructions or explanations as to why you were doing one in-service over another?
I don't know. I know. I think it was at the beginning of the year of 2021 when I was doing the V Academy still.
Yes,
And
sir.
then when I come back toward the end of, I think you said it was August when I come back, that's when everything had been switched over to Police One.
Do you recall if you had an opportunity to do any in-person in-service in 2021 when you got back in August?
I don't recall that, ma'am.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Any cross-examination?
Officer Bergen, can you hear me okay?
A little bit, yes, sir.
Is that better?
That's
It's gonna be, it's gonna be,
That's a light. That's a light.
Just speak loud, sir. Just speak loud.
How about that, Officer Bergen? Can you hear me better now?
Yes, sir.
My name is James Owen. I represent Chief Smith. And going back to that November 4th incident, that happened around 11 a.m. Is that right?
I believe so, sir. I just have the narrative that's on my report.
Did you first call dispatch to let them know you were on the scene?
Yeah. When I arrived on scene, I told them that I was on scene when I was pulling into the driveway.
Okay. And then because of the complexity of the circumstances, you thought you needed help making the decision to enter the home.
Yes, sir.
You called from your cell phone, 865-661-7775,
Yes, sir.
and you called Chief Smith's cell phone,
Yes, sir.
865-705-9822.
I'm not sure if that's the number I don't know his number verbatim, but I did call him.
On the number you knew to be his cell phone.
Yeah, I believe to be able to his cell phone.
Were there a series of cell phone calls back and forth between you and Chief Deputy Smith?
I'm actually unaware, sir. I don't remember or recall that detail.
You think it was just one phone call?
As far as reading my report to jog my memory, that's all I can remember, sir.
If I had cell phone records that showed multiple cell phone calls between you and Chief Deputy Smith, would that reflect your recollection?
Yeah, if there was something that could help me remember that, then I think that would definitely jog my memory.
Okay. And Your Honor, I don't have any way to show him this document, so I'm just going to read him the information if that's right.
Has Ms. Cooper already seen the document?
I have this.
He may be able to see on the camera, so you can see it.
Mr. Brogan, are you able to see us?
I can see the Mr. Bellows camera facing the.
Oh.
I'm trying to see if I can make it bigger.
That camera's in front of you, sir. That camera right there on the stand may be able to show.
Right. I'm just wondering, I asked about sharing with Ms. Cooper because I didn't know if there was a way to pull it up on the screen so that he can see it.
It should be.
Yes, I forwarded that along with the others too, Investigator Cooper, so I
Okay.
think she can bring it up on the screen.
All right. We're going to see Mr. Brogan if we can share the screen with you, and that will, Mr. Owen might be able to question you from that document once it's pulled up.
Okay.
Do I have this document, Mr. Owen?
I don't think I can get it in through this witness. It's Chief Smith, but I'd like to ask him a question.
Sure. But do I have the document?
Yes.
Okay.
It's labeled telephone records from 11/4. Yeah, on my screen, it's at the bottom of the page.
Officer Brogan, can you see that document?
No, sir. It's really fuzzy.
Hold on.
I think it may be the camera that I can see is the one that is on the podium in the center, in the back.
You can see me?
The camera's facing, the camera's facing us right there next to your right hand.
Sir, I can see the camera that's facing the board.
I'm going to direct you to line 48. Can you see that?
I cannot.
Does that help at all?
Hang on, let me see if I can't make the camera actually bigger. Okay, I cannot. It's so fuzzy, I cannot see it, sir.
Okay. With the court's permission, I'd just like to read it to him.
Any objection, Ms. Cooper?
No.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Owen.
Officer Brogan, I know these aren't your cell phone records. You have no way of authenticating this document, but I just wanted to read this to you, see if this maybe helps your recollection of what happened. Looks like a call came from your cell phone, 661-7775, Brian Smith at 11:04 on November the 4th at 10:55 a.m. Does that sound about right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. On your phone, do you have the sheriff's cell phone number saved?
Yes, sir. I have the sheriff's cell phone number as well.
Okay, read that out to us.
The sheriff's cell phone number?
Yes, don't mind.
Your Honor, I would just remind everyone, this is not only an open hearing, but it's also on Zoom for anyone who wants to watch. So
Is that his business phone? Let's make sure.
I think that's.
Well, that's usually confidential.
Just do the last four.
Let's just do the last.
Yeah.
That's right, that would be fine.
I'm gonna make sure I understand this correctly. Read the last four of the number that I have for Mr. Billy Breedy.
Yes, please.
Okay, the last four that I have in my phone is 1602.
And then I think another call came in from you on line 52 at 11:05 a.m. So I've been twice you called Chief Deputy Smith.
Okay,
That sound about right?
yes, sir.
Okay. And then Chief Deputy Smith called you back at around 11:13.
I do not recall that.
And then another call at 11:18. So that makes 4 or 5 calls back and forth between you and Chief Deputy Smith.
I don't recall that, sir.
Did Chief Smith ever tell you that he needed to call the sheriff before he could convey information to you as to whether or not to enter this house?
I can't recall that detail, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Morrell?
No questions this week.
Any redirect, Ms. Cooper?
No, ma'am.
All right, board members, any questions for Mr. Brogan?
Commissioners, any questions for this witness? Commissioner Parton, seems to be the popular one today. Mr. Brogan, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
At what time did you first go to work for Union County?
The very first time I've ever worked for Union County,
Yes.
it was when I was 18 and I was a corrections officer. I'm unsure of the year. I want to say maybe 2016.
Okay, can you kind of tell this board how many years or months experience you have under this present sheriff's administration at Union County?
Union County, I want to say maybe a year and a half, sir. I'm actually uncertain of the exact time.
Okay, and were you an employee of Union County Sheriff's Department when the first sanctions came out on the sheriff and the chief deputy?
What was that date, sir?
That's going to be about April of last year, I think.
I don't think I was, sir. I think I either resigned in March or June or somewhere near that time.
Okay, were you aware of the sanctions against the sheriff and chief deputy over the Cadis incident at Union County Sheriff's Office?
Just by rumor, sir. I couldn't confirm it or anything like that.
Just by rumor. Was that rumor by other officers or rumor by media?
Another officer, sir.
Other officers. Was that officers or deputies, I should say, of Union County Sheriff's Office?
Yes, sir.
Do you recall what they said about that?
No, sir.
Have you had any conversations with any other officers, deputies of surrounding counties or in Union County about the sheriff and chief deputy status?
No, sir.
Have you seen any media about their status of April of last year?
Not until just recently on WBR, sir.
Okay, that's all the questions I had. Any other questions of the commissioners?
Ms. Cooper, any redirect of your witness?
Mr. Brogan, when we talked earlier, I asked you if you had gone to work for Union County and would between September of 2020 and June of 2021. You said that sounded about right. Is that still sound about right?
And what was those dates again, ma'am?
You began September 14th of 2020, resigned June 7th of 2021, were rehired August 2nd of 2021, and resigned in good standing on March 27th of 2022.
Yes, ma'am.
Does that sound right?
Yes, ma'am. That sounds about right.
Okay, so you had all told, I think you even testified about a year and a half, a little over a year and a half of service to Union County under Sheriff Breeding. Does that sound right?
Yes, ma'am. As best of my knowledge.
Okay, and during that entire time, Chief Deputy Smith was also the chief deputy, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, and as far as you knew the entire time, Chief Deputy was in the chain of command and the chief deputy of the Union County Sheriff's Department, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
You were never officially told otherwise, is that right?
No, ma'am.
Okay, so Again, in November of 2021, when you needed to talk to your chain of command about entering a house, you called Chief Deputy Smith, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Would you have called Chief Deputy Smith in October of 2021 if you had the same situation?
Yes, ma'am.
And would you have called him in September of 2021 if you had had the same situation or needed assistance on a call?
Yes, ma'am.
Because as far as you knew, as far as the department knew, he was the chief deputy, correct?
Yes, ma'am. As far as I know, yes, ma'am.
Okay. And again, you were a rank and file deputy with the Union County Sheriff's Department.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Any other questions from the board based on that testimony?
Yes, I have. This is Commissioner Parker again. Sir, during that time, have you ever seen the chief deputy that you aware of that he was under sanction? Activate blue lights and stop a car?
Not to my knowledge, sir. I can't recall that.
Have you ever heard him on the two-way radio of Union County directing deputies on instruction in law enforcement matter?
No, sir.
No, does he say no?
Yes, sir. I said no.
Did he ever reach out to you or call you and give you any orders during that time?
Not that I can recall, sir.
Okay, thank you. Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Wright.
Officer Braden, in your report, you said you contacted 702 Union County Sheriff's Chief Deputy Smith, and I know this was a phone conversation that you had on that circumstance, but did you call and refer during that time period on the radio to 702?
No, sir. Best of my knowledge, I think I just automatically called his cell phone.
Thank you.
Any other questions from commissioners? Go ahead, Your Honor.
Ms. Cooper, any redirect then?
No, ma'am.
Any recross from? All right, thank you. All right, Mr. Brogan, thank you so much for your testimony. You are free to get off the call.
Thank you, ma'am.
We've been at this for a little while. Does the commission need a break? Okay. We go for more than 2 hours, so. Okay, so let's take about a 5 to 10 minute comfort break, then we'll take a recess. Thank you.
So we need Friday next time. Charge $1, $3 a can.
Sheriff.
A lot of blame going around today.
What's the matter?
I'm telling you.
I'm gonna be spending another.
Man, I just want to be Johnny Depp's turn.
You're gonna take a shower after that long.
I did surgery. I'm just getting paid 8 hours rate. So I step on the day, you get to some day, it's feeding tube down. It's like a little swallow. I took the catheter out about an hour ago. He sat up in the chair about 2 hours. This therapy can't get through neck exercise. I really pissed him off.
Things turn me on the way and still.
Yes, I'm going to go from there.
You hungry? Have you yet? Yeah.
So down there. Yeah, I figured that. Ways to go, because we heard the expense, yes. Well, maybe we fixed those.
Because she's the quorum.
Jury trial forever.
Yeah, serve other jury.
Might be a criminal case. Medical malpractice.
All the things.
I got on medical malpractice.
Okay, it's kind of made.
Straight. Right.
Oh, yeah.
And they were doing the board hours, like, what can I say? You know, this is. I'm thinking, but I know you said it was like, it's not like we hadn't tried cases against one another. But yeah, so it's a nurse, answer patient. To finish.
So I propose. Do we have?
We have four, I mean, we had 14 total, we need 8. No matter what.
My wife's been on the Grand Trail 3 times. Well, but it's cases one right after the other.
And then it goes lights on.
So.
They will.
Gentlemen, remind everybody that your microphones are on and are possibly picking up any side conversations.
I love my wife. Anniversary's coming up. No, no.
The smallest.
Grand Jersey.
Well, yeah, I mean, those are special circumstances.
But I know. So I'm, but I brought my calendar.
I remember riding by a house.
Yeah.
No, 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 no.
Yeah, I do. Thank you. Thank you, Sheriff Parton, for your faith.
Well, in 2002, we stopped.
Right there.
So. So there, I've been doing.
Well, no, we had some warnings.
Yeah, the bottom there, so before this. Before this.
We know what's going to be bad. The inflation rate is, even when people get their $50 lunch. My wife don't get it. I mean, you know,
I'm moving.
So.
No reason I can do it, because railroad are special deal.
Well,
I figured it'd give me a second. And that turns. Atlanta starts. But you know, now you don't, you still have.
Consider.
Primary.
4 years. I could sell it.
we had a broker price.
And then the people were out there,
Yeah, he wants to stop now on the road.
Yeah, so we'll do what we can. We're here.
So nobody was. That's what.
Well, see, that's what I do. I left. So.
Yes, perfect. You know that we're starting for time. That's it. One day. So now, so that's what we said. If you take a day, ask for something. Because you
I'll tell you right now, I don't know anything. I ain't sell these women. They don't sell dirt. Let's go all over.
I know.
Your merch burger was supposed to buy, right?
That was probably. We have some others.
We have one.
Legal case, so I've been with the commission. Kim Moore, I work with Kim. She get director.
Something about.
How many classes you want now? It's tapping. It's pretty nice. He's older, I can't take care of his wife. Run the farm, live in a little town, prices fall. It's exciting, she's excited. But my boys hunting more. I'm not much professional. I hope to pick them up. Fishing, boating, living on the water. I grew up here. My dad was a Metro police. Jimmy Underwood. And my uncle was Steve Underwood. Steve passed away. Yeah, and he worked good forever. I'm dad's brother.
I'm sorry. Close and yet wrong.
Yeah, he worked there for a time. We're talking about physical fitness. I was like, thinking for my yesterday, make sure officers get physical fit every 3 years. I said, that's done. I said, he dealt with that weight issue for a while. You know, he got it, which is
They still got 2.5 years. Still got 6 months trying to get in shape.
I go. My dad, well, my parents, of course, but my dad was
Did they move it back to June? I guess it was that. Okay.
I've never been, we'll never go.
Really?
I don't know if I ever.
I guess they call it Peabody. Ours used to, they call it Nippers Corner. I remember Nippers Corner was farm. Family farm. But I grew up there. I went to Granbury.
A lot of, we had a big old.
It's Creedmoor, I guess. It's right on the border of Tuskville. So friends are.
Stretch out in the back.
You know there? My cousin, no, my cousin had a house right there next to the corner over there in Thompson Lane. There's a Dairy King. Down from the street for Dairy King.
Yeah, that was over by the railroad tracks.
Yeah, they were right across that. Used to be that old steakhouse. Quarter bit or.
Third Riddler was on the other side.
Yeah, it's the old around Farmers Borough.
Mr. Underwood, when's the June third Friday? Is it still
I
scheduled?
believe it's the third Friday in June.
17.
We could do it. Or Thursday. Yeah.
Well, depends on what time.
At 9:30 in the morning would be good. On Thursday, we can have our.
Thursday.
We have any informal.
We can move it to
I'm
Thursday.
sure we do, but we can move
This meeting is the
it if we have
17th
to.
June. Right.
Or just keep it at 1 and do the 9:30 meeting, business meeting, go from there.
They're not.
Because they're both publicized, change out the agenda on the website.
But I mean, that'll.
It would be, well, I'm just saying from just a logistical standpoint on this property,
Okay.
Thursday would be, it's Thursday that you can't do.
No, it's the 17th.
Okay, 16th would be great. 17th, we're gonna have orientation here, so we're gonna have those, and we're gonna have everybody, 100 police vehicles.
We still have a regular formal meeting on Friday. We just have the hearing that morning. Just wait for the morning before the other. No, I'm talking about that. Thursday.
I can do the 16th.
It's kid at their council. That'll give you something to refer to talk about.
So we continue on.
Councilors, we ready? We ready, council?
So, Your Honor, can I think the court open? Your Honor? We understand that there's
Hold
another
on,
record.
not yet. So, all right, after a brief recess, we are back on the record. Thank you.
Sorry.
Okay, so I have raised the point with the attorneys about a stop time for today and not wanting to limit the two respondents in presenting their case. There's no statutory time frame in which an order has to be issued by this commission. I don't want to limit their time to put on their proof, nor do I want to limit the discussion time, which for the commission members who are more seasoned know that sometimes those discussions can be a little bit lengthy, and there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not going to limit any conversations and discussions with that. So we were talking about the stop time for today and almost certainly the need to continue the hearing maybe in about an hour. So utilizing what we have today and then coming back.
Your Honor, we've talked amongst ourselves and realized that no matter what's going to happen, we're going to have to come back.
Mhm.
Even one of our, and I don't want to say that we're lengthy on purpose or anything, but even our smallest witness might take 30 to 45 minutes. If we put our clients on, it's going to be an hour or so for them. And I don't want to think that we're going to go a whole day next time, but I think that we'd like to put our whole case on that one time.
Okay.
Since the post attorney has rested, we just asked if we could to break now and come back, have sufficient time to put the hearing on for our case.
And Ms. Cooper, I don't think had officially stated that prior to our break, but Ms. Cooper, you weren't going to call any more witnesses or submit any more documents into evidence? Okay, so the state has officially rested. We were discussing up here with the board chair, the commission chair and council and about when to come back, when would be a good time to do that. So it looks as if it's going to be June 16th.
It was here June 16th, I better wait my.
Okay.
Oh.
I appreciate Mr. Gaines, the respondent's perspective of wanting to present all their case at once.
Yes.
And so I'm not going to force that as well.
Thank you.
Both my assistant and I have a hearing in Nashville. We're witnesses on that day.
Interesting.
July 14th.
Right. July 14th would be the next date.
John, we've got one small matter.
Okay,
For the 15th. For the
I'm just
15th.
going to voice it since a lot of the people in this room are well aware, we have an August date for an election. Certainly like that June date, resolve this issue once and for all. In touch, colleague.
okay.
If I may, is it within the realm of possibility or willingness just to go today until we get done, just work whatever it takes and go? I'll stay here till midnight. if I need to.
The issue,
That's
thank you,
possible.
Commissioner Cherry. I appreciate you, it's other commissioners that we won't have a quorum. We're going to lose commissioners such that we won't have a quorum today. And sometimes I.
Look at me. Oh, look at me. I'm here.
I'm here.
I'm here. I'll be here.
I won't be, but y'all carry on.
Make a quick phone call to see if the attorney that we're going to be testifying for can work around our schedule.
Okay.
On that day. The June date's better if we can make that work.
Briefly, Your Honor, I'll put that out.
All right, thank you.
Is that June 14th, John?
That's June 16th, a Thursday.
Very good.
They're both Thursdays.
We would certainly like to keep that date.
Really?
Good. Just don't hold it around. I've always kept it. We've had to make a meeting work. We've had to keep count of it. That's what.
I'll raise that issue before. Thank you.
Do they know it's 9:30 on Wednesday, Thursday?
Yeah, it would be in the morning, commissioners.
And council be 9:30 on the Thursday in the morning? Is that
The
effective?
earlier the better, Commissioner. That'd be great.
From a commission standpoint, Commissioner Cherry has just brought to my attention that perhaps he would not be available on June 16th. And of course, we do want to make sure that we would still have a quorum on that date. Are there any other commission members who would not be available to come and return on June 16th
For that morning.
for that morning?
I may not be able to.
Okay, there's two,
We also have 3 members currently not here.
right, but they need to start. with the case.
Yes, I got you.
But we'd still have a quorum, even if those two commission members.
Yes.
Commissioner Forster and Commissioner.
We get to lose up to 3.
Is that?
That's not what's pushed on, but apparently somebody else has more agenda than.
Well.
It's your court.
Are there, how much longer, how long do you think, Mr. Owen, Mr. Gaines, do you think that you'll need to present your case? Cases.
Considering the sheriff and Chief Deputy Smith's testimony, cross-examination, and 3 or 4 other witnesses, I'd say 3.5 hours.
So from that standpoint, what commission, aside, the chair has already informed me that he would not be able to stay for the next 4 hours, plus commission discussion afterward. And I can't put a time frame on that. Are there other commissioners present? Okay,
Late, I have to leave later on. I have a car that's in the shop. I've got to pick up by a deadline.
so there's 3. Mr. Chair, Commissioner Spangler's already recused himself. Are there any others?
That's the minimum.
That would give us, we'd still be at a quorum today. Commissioner Faulkner, are you able to stay? No. Tell me, what is a quorum? I mean, it seems like eight.
Eight members.
We would have that today.
Well, that's why I want to make sure if we continued.
We're still off the road. Look, can I take back her? I'm gonna call a roll call. And I'll start with myself. I'm gonna be leaving you now in the next 30 minutes because we had no idea, no disrespect to the parties involved who have traveled and attorneys, y'all have done very well. But unlike in criminal courts or federal courts, we kind of know ahead of time of scheduling and hours, and we kind of are on a schedule. We didn't have that in that proceeding, so I apologize. It's not no fault to any of you. But I'm going to be falling out on you in the next now 25 minutes. And so that'll be one down. Chief, same. Chief, that's three. Sheriff, you were already that you were already out.
Whenever.
You're whenever. Senator Jackson.
They've been a couple hours at the most.
Okay, so we got Ify. So we got three there. Anybody else on the other side of the room?
Okay, I'll stay.
Lieutenant, okay. Mr. Forrester, you're good. Mr. Green, you're good. So that'll be 1, 2, 3. That'll be, and possibly, so I'm gonna count Senator Jackson as good. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Senator Jackson's good for a couple hours.
Yeah, but I counted, I included him,
But not for 5 hours.
not for 5. So 1,
And so-
2, 3, 4, 5, 6 is all you're gonna have for a quorum.
So we can't continue today without a quorum.
Your Honor, if I could, on the June 16th date, you say that we'll start in the morning early. But we have plenty of time that day, do you suppose, in the afternoon? Can we schedule that for all of us now? Or?
You'll have the whole day, sir.
Okay. I don't want to take the whole day.
The whole business day.
The whole
business, with the lunch break we have, right?
So
Okay.
be clear about that, yes.
So 9:30 Nashville time to whenever we end, and then deliberate.
Within a business day.
That would be perfect.
Okay.
Just double check.
All right, double checking. Thank you.
To me, maintaining consistency is because the commissioner members who've already left would probably not be voting on this matter. Because it's not hearing the testimony and so forth.
Right.
It'd be imperative that the three of you to be there. Here would be necessary.
Your Honor, we can do the 16th. We'll be here with bells on. We'll start bright and early. It goes.
Okay, so in the meantime, Ms. Cooper's going to give you those 2 exhibits. Commission members, as you've been instructed by your chief counsel, we do have to have a quorum of 8 of the people who are here today who heard the testimony thus far. So you'll need to notify the staff if that's not going to happen so that we could then look at a different date. But for now, this will continue the trial until 9:30 on Tuesday, June 16th. Thursday. Did I say Tuesday? Thursday, June 16th. All right.
30 seconds.
And 30 Central Time, that's right, for our Knoxville folks. Okay. Anything else, Ms. Cooper, from the department's perspective while we're all together?
No, ma'am, just procedural. Will you enter that order or do you want me to draft the order?
I'll draft an order.
Okay.
Because I may want to put some other timeframes in for the attorneys, and so I need to think about that.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Mr. Owen?
I was going to ask that the opposing counsel is rested, but I think we've already covered that.
Yes, that's correct. That's on the record. All right, we stand adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner members, this will not be discussed among in privacy. It's not to be deliberated or considered outside this room until we meet again.
Yes.
Thank you.
Don't investigate anything on your own.
No investigation, no communications, no discussion. Don't even dream about it.